Hello everyone, and welcome to the Decorators section of this course. So, decorators can be thought as functions which modify the functionality of another function, which I know sounds weird, but they'll help make your code shorter and more Pythonic. It's a pretty advanced topic, and you run into it more when you start working with web frameworks, such as Django or Flask, with Python. So, something I want to note, before you start this lecture, restart Python and the Jupyter notebooks in order to keep track of some of the global functions we'll be working with. I think the lecture will make more sense that way. Okay, so we might have to split up this section into multiple videos, so we'll see how it goes. But what we're going to do is just start explaining decorators by slowly building up from functions. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of a functions review. So I'm going to make the simplest function I can. I'm going to make a function called def_func1. Let me zoom in a bit for you guys. And all it's going to do is return 1. So if I call func, func, I get 1. So let's go over a bit of a review with scope. So remember from the nested statements lecture that Python uses scope to know what a label it's referring to. So for instance, I'm going to create a variable called s, and it's going to be a string called this is a global variable. And notice how it's not inside any function, so it's global. And it's not inside a class either. And so now I'm going to make a function. I'm going to rewrite func, and it's going to print locals. Okay. So remember that Python functions create a new scope, meaning the function has its own namespace. So this function has its own namespace to find variable names when they're mentioned from within the function. So remember, it checks this first before checking the global scope. And we can check for local variables and global variables with locals and globals. Those are just built-in functions that you can call to get the globals and local variables. So let's say I wanted to figure out, okay, what are all the global variables I have? If I say print globals, we're going to get a large output right now. So we get all this. And this is basically a dictionary of a bunch of basically all the global variables we have right now. So what we can do is just call the keys of that dictionary. And so here are all the keys of that dictionary. And this basically are all the global variables right now that Python is holding on to. And so remember that we created this s, so it's a global variable, and if you notice, it's right here. So it's a key. So I can actually, since this is a dictionary, call s, and it treats them all as strings. It converts all the keys into strings. And now this is a global variable, pops out. So just to keep in mind, globals, it's a dictionary of all the global variables and what they stand for. And right now we've created one called s, which is just a string saying this is a global variable. But now what's interesting is if I run my function, remember this function just prints locals, but since there's no variables defined within that function, I get an empty dictionary out. Alright, so that's just something to keep in mind. So now we're going to continue with building out the logic of what a decorator actually is. And in order to do that, I want to remind you that in Python, as we've discussed before, everything is an object. That means functions are objects which can be assigned labels and passed into other functions. So let's start with a simple example of that. I'm going to create a function, and it's called hello, and it takes a name, and by default I'll just have the name be Jose. And I'll have it return hello space plus the name. Okay, so if I call hello right now, I get hello Jose. Now what I can do is assign a label to that function. So check this out. I'm going to say greet equals hello. And notice that I'm not using parentheses here because I'm not calling the function hello. Instead, I'm just assigning it to the variable. So if I do this and then call greet, it's a function which is hello. So then if I call greet closed, it'll print out hello Jose. So I've set the greet variable equal to the hello function. And something to understand is that this assignment with greet is not attached to the original function. So if I delete hello, so notice I've deleted that function from memory now. So if I call hello, it says hello is not defined. I'd have to run this cell again to redefine it. But I want you to realize that greet isn't actually attached. So greet still works. Okay. So let's go over slowly what we've done. We're thinking about decorators and we want to build our understanding off of functions. So here's an example of a simple function that just returns 1. So if I call that function, I get 1. Now let's remember about global variables. I set s to be a global variable, which is just a string saying this is a global variable. And I've called a function, func, which prints locals. And since there's no other local variables defined within this function, just to remind us of scope, if I were to call that function, I get an empty dictionary out from that locals call. Now, something else, we wanted to check globals, which we could do with that globals function, which returns that dictionary of all the globals. And I can call the s key to get back the global variable. Next, we wanted to reiterate that functions can be assigned to variable labels because everything's an object in Python. So I created a function called hello. Default was name equals Jose, and it just returned hello plus name. So when I called hello, I got hello Jose. Since everything in Python is an object, I could assign hello to the variable greet. Now, something to note here is that greet wasn't attached to hello. So if I deleted hello, hello didn't work anymore, but greet still did. Okay, so that's it for now. In the next video, we're going to learn about functions within functions. And we're going to also be dealing with this same hello and greet function. Okay, I'll go ahead and stop the video here, and we'll continue on in the next video.